pretty cool research that you actually sent our way.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, about LLMs.
LLMs.
Yeah, large language models.
Okay.
Those systems that can,
Yeah, write you a poem.
write a poem or answer your trivia question, all that.
Have a conversation.
But
yeah.
what if we could go beyond just
Right.
giving them prompts
Yeah.
and actually shake the way they think?
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about today.
I love it.
Yeah.
So what's so interesting about this research is that
Okay.
it goes beyond just telling an LLM to act say,
Be a doctor.
like a doctor or lawyer.
Right.
It actually uses something called role vectors
Role vector.
to actually influence the LLM's internal workings.
Oh, wow.
So think of it like giving the LLM a set of instructions
Okay.
that affect how it processes information, almost like subtly guiding its thought process.
So instead of saying you're a doctor,
Right.
we're giving it this mathematical
Exactly.
doctor role vector.
Yeah, you got it.
That sounds like
And this is
way more complex.
different than what researchers have tried before, which is just to add a persona description to a prompt,
Right. So
which often isn't all that effective.
they've already tried that, and
Yeah.
it doesn't really work.
It's like putting a chef's hat on someone
Right.
who's never even boiled water.
Right.
They might look the part,
Yeah, they're not.
but their actual abilities haven't changed.
Yeah, you can't just tell someone to be a chemist and
Yeah.
expect them to know
Exactly.
complex chemical reactions. So how
Right.
did the researchers actually...
Yeah, so how did they create these role vectors?
Yeah.
Well, you're right, it is complicated,
Yeah.
but they took a clever approach.
Okay.
Imagine the LLM's internal activations as this vast network
Okay.
of connections.
Okay.
The role vector acts like a spotlight,
Okay.
highlighting specific pathways within this network
So
and influencing how information flows through it.
it's almost like saying, here's the path I want you to go down.
Here's the path, exactly.
Okay.
To create these vectors, they started with a massive collection
Mhm.
of personas
Okay.
from a resource called Persona Hub.
Persona.
So this gives them tons of examples of what different roles look like in practice.
Oh, that's so...
A treasure trove of data to work with.
Right. So they had this huge library
Yes.
of different personality types
Exactly.
to analyze
Mhm.
what did they do with all that data.
They fed this data
Okay.
into the LLMs
Okay.
and observed how the LLM's internal activations, those connections we were talking about,
Right.
change when processing information
Okay.
related to a chemist,
Right.
a lawyer,
sure.
a musician, you name it.
Got it.
By analyzing these changes, they were able to create mathematical vectors.
Okay.
Think of them as numerical fingerprints
Okay.
that represented specific roles.
So they use this massive data set
Yeah.
to map out
Exactly.
the thought patterns of different roles
Mhm.
within the LLM.
Exactly.
But how do they actually test if these role vectors worked?
Right.
Did they just ask the LLM?
Yeah. Did they say, hey, are you feeling more like a chemist now?
Are you feeling more like a chemist now?
Oh,
Okay.
not quite.
Okay.
They used these role vectors to see how they affected the LLM's performance
Okay.
on a series of multiple choice questions
Okay.
from a benchmark called MMLU. It's a
MMLU.
massive multitask language understanding benchmark.
Okay.
Covers a bunch of different subjects from science and math to
Right.
history and law.
So they gave the LLM a chemist role vector
Right.
and tested if it aced the chemistry questions.
Yeah, you got it.
But they didn't just use any old LLM for this.
Right.
Did they?
No, they used several popular open source LLMs
For testing some developed by.
including some developed by Meta,
And
Google. This was all about pushing the boundaries
Yeah.
and seeing what was possible.
So did adding these role vectors actually make a difference?
So did it actually work?
Did the LLM suddenly become experts
Did they suddenly become experts in specific fields?
in specific fields?
Hold on tight, because the results are fascinating.
Okay.
In many cases, adding the role vector led to a significant improvement
Okay.
in the LLM's performance
Okay.
on questions related to that specific role.
Right.
For instance, if you gave an LLM a mathematician vector,
Okay.
it often became much better
Okay.
at answering math questions.
So they were able to steer the LLM's thinking
Yeah.
toward a particular domain.
Yeah, it's like giving it a specialized boost
Right.
in that particular area.
Are we talking about minor improvements, or was this
Right, let's get specific.
okay,
Let's
okay.
take a look at some specific
Yeah.
examples from their testing.
Okay.
Some of these results are pretty remarkable.
Okay.
They laid it all out in Table 3 of the research paper.
Table 3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
What jumps out at you?
well, right away I'm noticing that
Yeah,
some of these performance boosts
yeah,
are huge.
yeah.
Like check out
Yeah.
the electronics technician role.
Yeah, the electrical engineering and computer science questions
Accuracy went up by over 10%.
went up by over 10%.
After applying the role vector.
Huge jump.
That's huge.
Right.
That's amazing.
And what's even more interesting is if you look at that same row,
Okay.
you'll see that the performance on the law questions actually went down.
Oh,
So this suggests that the role vector was actually making the LLM focus
okay.
on the targeted domain,
Got it.
even if it meant
Okay.
getting a bit worse in other areas.
So they're hyper-focused.
hyper-focused.
But then that raises the question, are we making them
yeah.
super smart in one area
Are we making trade-off?
at the expense of
Right.
overall knowledge?
Right. That's a valid question.
Right.
And definitely something that needs to be investigated further.
But are there any times when the role vectors just didn't work?
right.
Or
were there any surprises in the results?
yeah, was there anything surprising in the results?
There were definitely a few surprises along the way.
Okay.
And that's what we'll be digging into next.
Okay.
Right?
Sounds good.
Yeah. One thing that really surprised us was that this effect, the boost in performance,
Right.
was much stronger when they used larger, more sophisticated LLMs.
Okay.
Smaller, less complex models didn't seem to benefit as much from the role vectors.
So it's kind of like you need
Right.
like the right hardware to run a complex program.
It's like trying to run a powerful program on
Yeah.
an older computer.
Got it.
And here's another interesting twist.
Okay.
Sometimes the role vector's influence
Okay.
actually spilled over into areas that were related to
Right.
the target domain.
Interesting.
For example, giving an LLM a doctor role vector
Right.
not only helped with medical questions,
Okay.
but also seemed to give it a slight edge
Interest.
on questions about natural science in general.
So they're getting kind of like
yeah,
broader
understanding,
understanding, even though it's focused.
even though it's narrowly focused.
Right.
But here's where things get even more interesting.
Oh, okay.
Even when the role vectors did work,
Okay.
they weren't always perfectly understood by the LLMs.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so
Did they get the right answer but not really get it?
that's a great way to put it.
Okay.
The researchers used a technique called patch scoping.
Patch scoping.
Yeah, so this allowed them to kind of peek into what was happening inside the LLM's minds.
So they were trying to see if
Yeah.
it's actually thinking like a chemist.
Exactly.
Okay.
And what they found was that only about 16% of the time
16%.
did the LLM's response actually align with the role it was given,
Right.
even when its performance had improved.
That's fascinating.
So
It's almost like they figured out a shortcut.
it's like they learned to play the game
Right.
without fully grasping the rules.
Right. And that's a big difference.
It is a big difference.
Like, understanding versus just getting the right answer.
Right,
So I know that they only tested this on
right,
open source LLMs.
right. What about the big ones?
What about like
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT? Yeah.
That's a key question.
Would it work on that?
And unfortunately,
Okay.
we don't have the answer yet.
Okay.
The models they used in this research
Right.
are kind of like the indie bands of the LLM world.
Okay.
They're interesting,
Right.
they're experimental,
Yeah.
but they don't necessarily represent the mainstream hits.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible that things would play out differently
Okay.
with the larger, more commercially available models.
But if we can make an LLM
Yeah.
appear competent
Appear competent
in
for
a
that.
specific area
Right.
without actually understanding it,
Yeah.
what does that mean for,
What does that mean for fields that rely heavily
right, like medicine or law?
on expertise?
Right, where it's like,
Yeah.
it's really important that you actually understand this.
Yeah, you're hitting on a crucial point.
Right.
We need to be incredibly careful
Okay.
about how we apply these techniques,
Right.
especially in areas where human judgment
Right.
and experience are paramount.
Okay.
But before we get into the ethical considerations,
Okay.
there's one more important limitation
What's that?
we need to address.
Okay.
And that is, we still don't fully understand why this technique works.
Oh, so we're kind of operating in the dark.
We know that the role vectors are influencing the LLM's
Right.
internal activations,
Right.
but the exact mechanisms are still a mystery.
So we've discovered a powerful tool,
Yeah.
but we don't really know how it works.
We don't have the instruction manual.
That's both exciting
Right.
and terrifying.
A little nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
I think it's time we shift gears
Okay.
and delve into
Right.
the broader implications of all of this.
I'm ready for the deep end. Let's
Yay.
go. We've been talking about how,
Right.
like how to shape the way LLMs think.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the bigger question is the why.
Right.
If we can influence their
Done.
thoughts
Right.
using these techniques,
Yeah.
what are the implications?
It's a question that we're going to be wrestling with for years to come.
Right.
I mean, we're used to thinking of AI as like a tool.
Yeah.
But what happens when those tools start to
Right.
resemble us
Right.
in ways we never anticipated?
Are we blurring the lines between
Yeah, I mean,
what's human
are we blurring the line
and what's artificial?
between human and artificial?
And then how should we even be using
Yeah.
these LLMs?
Yeah, I mean, what role
Are there roles we should or shouldn't give them?
should we be giving them? Exactly.
Yeah.
It's uncharted territory.
Right.
I mean, we're exploring the boundaries of intelligence,
Right.
what it means to truly understand something.
Are there any areas where you think it would be ethical?
I think we need to tread carefully
Okay.
when it comes to areas where human judgment,
Yeah.
empathy, and experience
Yeah.
are crucial.
Like healthcare,
Healthcare, therapy.
social work.
Yeah, anything that
Really
it's
require a deep understanding
of human emotion.
of human emotions and relationships.
I mean, I'm not really comfortable with,
I'm not comfortable with an LLM giving me therapy.
yeah, even if it has a
Therapist vector.
little vector.
I don't think a machine can understand
I don't think so.
the complexity
The complexities.
of human emotion.
Right.
And I also think, beyond those specific fields,
Yeah.
there's also just a broader question of transparency.
Right. Do we have a right to know?
Yeah, do we have a right to know that we're interacting with
Yeah.
an LLM
That's been given a role vector.
that has been specifically shaped
Right.
to think a certain way?
Transparency is essential.
Yeah, otherwise we're being misled.
We need to be able to trust
Yes.
this information.
It's like those deepfake videos.
Exactly.
You don't know if you're looking at a real person
Right. Are we being deceived?
or a computer-generated image.
Yeah, I think this underscores
Right.
the need for clear guidelines
Yeah.
and regulations
Around the use of this technology.
We can't just leave it up to tech
It-
companies.
It feels like this research has just opened up
It's a Pandora's
the
box
Pandora's box.
of possibilities.
Yeah, and we don't know where to go from here.
We're at a pivotal moment, so the choices we make now
Okay.
are going to have a huge impact
Yeah.
on how these technologies are developed and integrated
Right, it's up to all of us to be
into our lives.
responsible and ethical.
It is.
So I have one final question for you.
Okay.
If we can shape the way LLMs think,
Yeah.
what does that say about our understanding
Right.
of intelligence?
That's a fantastic question.
Are we getting close to replicating?
Honestly,
Or are
I
we
don't know.
creating something?
But that's what makes this
Totally
different whole field so fascinating.
I think that's a perfect note to end on.
All right.
So, to everyone listening out there,
Yes.
we want to hear from you.
Let's keep this conversation going.
What are your thoughts on all of this?
Head over to our website
Head over to our website, find us on social media.
or find us on social media.
Let's keep this conversation going.
Exactly.
Because the future of all LLMs and our relationship with them
It's up to us.
is ultimately in our hands.
It is.
Keep exploring, keep questioning,
Keep diving deep.
and keep diving deep.